in the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean during World War II, where steel titans clashed beneath tropical skies, and the fate of nations hung in the balance, one modest destroyer escort would accomplish what no other warship in naval history had achieved before or since. Between May 19th and May 31st, 1944, a single American warship would sink 6 enemy submarines in just 12 days, establishing a record so remarkable that it remains unmatched to this day. This is the extraordinary tale of USS England, a vessel that would systematically hunt down and destroy an entire line of Japanese submarines, changing the course of naval warfare and demonstrating the deadly effectiveness of new anti-submarine technology. The story of USS England is not merely a tale of technological superiority or tactical brilliance, but a profound testament to the convergence of human courage, intelligence, breakthrough, and innovation under the most extreme conditions imaginable. The story begins not with thunderous guns or dramatic sea battles, but in the quiet, methodical work of American codebreakers operating from a nondescript building in Pearl Harbor. On May 13, 1944, the Fleet Radio Unit Pacific, known as FRU-PAC, intercepted a routine Japanese radio transmission. The message sent from submarine I-16 to the commander of Japanese Submarine Division 7 contained what seemed like mundane operational details: an estimated time of arrival off Bougainville in the Solomon Islands, scheduled for 2200 hours on May 22nd. But to the trained eyes of American intelligence officers, this intercepted message represented something far more valuable: an opportunity to strike at the heart of Japan's underwater fleet. The intelligence operation that made England's success possible had its roots in years of painstaking work by American cryptanalysts. Since the early days of the war, teams of mathematicians, linguists, and puzzle solvers had labored in secrecy to break Japanese naval codes. Their work, conducted in windowless rooms filled with IBM tabulating machines and mountains of paper, had already contributed to American victories at Midway and in the Solomon Islands. But never before had decoded intelligence been used so directly and effectively in anti-submarine warfare. The process of breaking the Japanese naval code JN-25 required not just mathematical brilliance but also deep cultural understanding and linguistic expertise. Each message had to be intercepted, recorded, analyzed for patterns, and painstakingly decoded using techniques that combined mechanical computation with human intuition. The decoded intelligence was immediately transmitted through secure channels to 3rd Fleet, and from there to Commander Hamilton Haines, who commanded Escort Division 39 stationed at Tulagi in the Solomon Islands. Haines was a veteran destroyer commander who had seen action in the Atlantic before being transferred to the Pacific. His experience hunting German U-boats would prove invaluable in the coming engagement. Haines wasted no time in organizing a response. He ordered the formation of a 3-ship hunter-killer task group, selecting the best anti-submarine vessels available for this critical mission. The group would consist of 3 Buckley-class destroyer escorts, USS George under the command of Lieutenant Commander Fred W. Just Raby, DE-698, commanded by Lieutenant Commander James Scott, and USS England, DS-635, led by Lieutenant Commander Walton Barclay Pendleton. All 3 ships departed Purvis Bay on May 18, 1944, with Commander Haines embarked aboard George as the officer in tactical command. The selection of these 3 ships was no accident. Each had been specifically equipped and trained for anti-submarine warfare, and their crews had spent months perfecting their skills in the dangerous waters around the Solomon Islands. But this submarine hunt was part of a much larger strategic picture unfolding across the Pacific. Additional radio intelligence revealed a disturbing development. The Japanese were establishing a scouting line of 7 submarines designated the NA line, stretching between the Admiralty Islands north of New Guinea and Truk in the Caroline Islands. This submarine picket line was positioned directly across the route that American carriers were expected to use in their next major operation. The Japanese High Command was anticipating new Allied landings, but remained uncertain about the target. Would it be the Marianas, the Western Caroline Islands, or the western end of New Guinea? The strategic thinking behind the Japanese submarine deployment reflected the desperate situation facing the Imperial Navy in mid-1944. With their carrier force decimated and their island bases increasingly isolated, submarines represented one of the few remaining tools for gathering intelligence and potentially disrupting American operations. The NA line was conceived as an early warning system that would give the Japanese fleet time to respond to American moves. Each submarine was assigned a specific patrol area with orders to remain on station and report any American naval movements. The rigid nature of these assignments, so different from the flexible patrol areas used by American submarines, would prove to be a fatal flaw in the Japanese plan. To support Operation Eigo, Vice Admiral Takagi Takeo, commander of the Japanese 6th Fleet submarines, directed submarines from the 7th Submarine Squadron to establish the NA scouting line. In a decision that would prove fatal, 7 Japanese submarines were assigned to specific fixed positions along this line, rather than being given flexible operating areas as American submarines typically were. This rigid positioning would become a critical vulnerability. The chain of events that would doom these submarines began when Japanese forces intercepted an American aircraft's contact report. In response, the Japanese promptly radioed orders to the entire NA line to shift their position 60 nautical miles to the southeast, transmitting specific coordinates for each submarine's new position. This seemingly routine operational message was intercepted by American radio intelligence and immediately forwarded to the Joint Intelligence Center Pacific Ocean area, where cryptanalysts worked feverishly to break out the coordinates. Though the process was complex, the American codebreakers successfully extracted the precise positions of each submarine in the NA line. For the first time in the Pacific War, this ultra-secret intelligence would be sanitized and shared directly with anti-submarine forces, giving them an unprecedented advantage in hunting enemy submarines. The intelligence proved remarkably accurate. In each case, the Japanese submarines would be found within 50 nautical miles, and often much closer to exactly where the decoded messages indicated they would be. The 3 destroyer escorts of the hunter-killer group were all relatively new Buckley-class vessels, part of a massive wartime construction program that would eventually produce 154 of these specialized anti-submarine warships. The Buckley class represented a compromise between capability and mass production. Smaller and less expensive than fleet destroyers, they could be built quickly in commercial shipyards by workers with limited experience. Yet they packed enough firepower and anti-submarine equipment to be deadly submarine hunters. Each ship had been named to honor a fallen hero, carrying forward the legacy of American servicemen who had made the ultimate sacrifice. USS George bore the name of Seaman Second Class Eugene F. George, who had been posthumously awarded the Navy Cross for his heroic actions as an anti-aircraft gunner aboard the heavy cruiser USS San Francisco during the brutal naval battle of Guadalcanal on November 12, 1942. USS Raby was named for Rear Admiral James Joseph Raby, who had earned the Navy Cross during World War I while commanding transatlantic convoy operations. USS England carried perhaps the most poignant history of all. She was named for Ensign John Charles England, a young naval officer who had been killed during the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. England, just 4 days shy of his 21st birthday, had volunteered to work in USS Oklahoma's radio room that fateful morning, trading shifts with a friend. When Japanese torpedoes struck the battleship and she began to capsize, Ensign England initially escaped to the deck. But remembering the men still trapped in the radio room below, England made a fateful decision. He returned to the sinking ship's interior. 3 times he descended into the capsizing battleship, each time successfully guiding a trapped sailor to safety through passages that were rapidly filling with water and oil. On his 4th attempt to rescue his shipmates, Ensign England disappeared into Oklahoma's flooding compartments and was never seen again. He was one of 429 officers and men who perished aboard Oklahoma that day. Initially buried among the unknown casualties at Punchbowl National Cemetery in Hawaii, Ensign England's remains would not be identified until 2016, when advances in DNA technology finally allowed him to be returned home to Colorado Springs, where he was reburied next to his parents. The Buckley-class destroyer escorts were purpose-built submarine hunters, armed with three 3-inch guns for surface action, but optimized for anti-submarine warfare. Their arsenal included one triple bank of 21-inch torpedoes, 2 stern-mounted depth charge racks, 8 K-gun depth charge projectors, and most importantly, 1 Mark 10 Hedgehog anti-submarine mortar. It was this last weapon that would prove decisive in the coming battles. The Hedgehog represented a revolution in anti-submarine warfare, addressing fundamental flaws that had plagued submarine hunters since World War I. Developed by the British Directorate of Miscellaneous Weapons Development in 1941 and first deployed in 1942, the Hedgehog had only recently become widely available to American forces in late 1943. The weapon consisted of 24 projectiles arranged in 6 rows of 4, mounted on a trainable platform, that could fire them in an elliptical pattern 200 to 300 yards ahead of the attacking ship. Each projectile weighed 65 pounds with a 35-pound charge of TNT or Torpex explosive. What made the Hedgehog revolutionary was its contact-fused warheads. Unlike traditional depth charges, which detonated at preset depths using hydrostatic fuses regardless of whether they were near a submarine, each Hedgehog projectile would only explode on direct contact with a solid object. This fundamental difference provided several crucial advantages. First, the success or failure of an attack was immediately apparent. If one or more projectiles hit a submarine, there would be explosions. If all missed, there would be silence. The Hedgehog could be reloaded in approximately 3 minutes, allowing for rapid follow-up attacks. Second, and perhaps most importantly, the Hedgehog solved the problem of sonar blindness that had long plagued anti-submarine forces. Traditional depth charges created massive underwater explosions, whether they hit their target or not, and these detonations would deafen the attacking ship's sonar for many minutes. With the Hedgehog, if the projectiles missed, there were no explosions to disturb the water, allowing the attacking ship to maintain continuous sonar contact and immediately set up for another attack. Statistics from the war would later prove the Hedgehog's devastating effectiveness. British analysis showed that during World War II, an average of 60 traditional depth charge attacks were required to sink one submarine. With the Hedgehog, this ratio improved dramatically to approximately 1 submarine sunk for every 5 to 6 attacks, a 10-fold improvement in lethality. The submarine I-16 that had triggered this hunt was no ordinary vessel but a veteran of 9 war patrols with a distinguished, if ultimately tragic, combat record. A Type C-1 submarine, one of the largest in the Japanese fleet, I-16 was 358 feet long and displaced 3,561 tons submerged. It was I-16 that had achieved a unique place in history by launching the very first midget submarine attack of the Pacific War at Pearl Harbor. Under the command of Lieutenant Junior Grade Yokoyama Masaharu, Wetter 16's midget submarine had been launched, attempting to penetrate the harbor defenses and attack American warships from within. 6 months later, on May 30th, 1942, I-16 achieved what had eluded her at Pearl Harbor, a successful midget submarine attack. Operating in the Indian Ocean against British forces at Diego Suarez, Madagascar, Wetter 16 launched a midget submarine that successfully penetrated the British anchorage and fired its torpedoes, scoring a hit on the British battleship HMS Ramillies that caused severe damage. During the Guadalcanal campaign, I-16 conducted multiple resupply runs to isolated Japanese garrisons. On November 28, 1942, she launched a midget submarine which successfully torpedoed the American cargo ship USS Alchiba. On May 14, 1944, I-16 departed Truk Lagoon under the command of Lieutenant Commander Takeuchi Yoshitaka, carrying a cargo of rice in 75 rubber bags intended for the starving Japanese garrison at Bouin on Bougainville. But I-16's departure transmission, intercepted and decoded by American intelligence, had sealed her fate. The three American destroyer escorts were already converging on her predicted position. On the afternoon of May 19, 1944, an Allied reconnaissance aircraft, a consolidated PBY Catalina, spotted I-16 on the surface north of Bougainville, confirming the intelligence that had brought the hunter-killer group to these waters. The three destroyer escorts immediately formed a line abreast and commenced a coordinated sonar sweep of the area. At 13:35 hours, England's sonar operator reported contact with a submerged submarine at a range of 1,350 yards. The hunt was on. I-16 immediately commenced standard Japanese submarine evasion tactics, radical changes in depth and direction, sudden speed changes, and sharp turns. Lieutenant Commander Pendleton brought England in for her first attack run. The first Hedgehog salvo missed as I-16 successfully evaded. The second attack also failed to connect. On the third attack, England's Hedgehog scored a single hit, but the big submarine's strong hull absorbed the damage and she continued her desperate evasion maneuvers. Pendleton, demonstrating remarkable persistence, set up for a fourth attack, which again missed. But on the fifth attack run at 14:35 hours, multiple projectiles found their mark, and the ocean erupted. The massive underwater explosion that followed was so powerful, it lifted England's stern completely out of the water, throwing men to the deck and rattling the entire ship. 20 minutes later, oil and debris began rising to the surface: rice bags, pieces of wood cork insulation, and other unmistakable evidence that I-16 had been destroyed. The submarine that had launched the first midget submarine attack at Pearl Harbor was gone, taking all 107 officers and men to their deaths. Meanwhile, the 7 submarines of the NA line had departed Saipan around May 17, 1944, to take up their assigned positions. All 7 were RO-class boats, type RO-100 submarines that were much smaller than I-16. Originally designed for coastal defense, these 760-ton boats were armed with 4 torpedo tubes in the bow, carrying 8 torpedoes total, plus a 76mm deck gun. The first submarine of the NA line to meet its fate was RO-106. This submarine had already compiled a notable war record. On July 18, 1943, RO-106 had torpedoed the American tank landing ship LST-342 in Blanche Channel near New Georgia. The torpedo detonated the LST's ammunition stores, causing a catastrophic explosion. In the pre-dawn darkness of May 22, 1944, at 03:50 hours, Georgia's radar operator detected a surface contact that proved to be RO-106. George illuminated the submarine with a 24-inch searchlight, catching her completely by surprise. Despite the surprise, RO-106's crew reacted quickly, crash diving beneath the surface. At 04:25, England gained sonar contact on RO-106 as she attempted to escape. England's first Hedgehog attack missed, but then the submarine made what may have been a fatal tactical error. RO-106 reversed course and turned bow on to England, possibly attempting to fire torpedoes at her attacker. England's second attack scored at least 3 direct hits. The explosions would have been catastrophic inside the submarine. RO-106 was lost with all 49 hands. The entire action from first radar contact to the submarine's destruction had taken just 36 minutes. The next day brought another success. RO-104, under the command of Lieutenant Hisashi Izu, had spent most of her previous patrols in the frigid waters of the North Pacific and Aleutian Islands. On May 23, 1944, 06:04 hours, an Allied aircraft spotted RO-104 on the surface approximately 250 nautical miles north-northwest of Kavieng, New Ireland. Raby made the first attack run, but RO-104 employed sophisticated countermeasures, transmitting bursts of tuned sound impulses designed to jam Raby's sonar. The tactic worked. Raby made 4 Hedgehog attacks over the course of 2 hours, all of which missed. George then took over the attack, making 5 Hedgehog runs. All 5 salvos missed, as RO-104 twisted and turned beneath the waves. Finally, at 08:19, England moved in. England's sonar team had been carefully observing RO-104's evasion patterns for over 2 hours. On the second attack, between 10 and 12 projectiles found their mark, and the resulting underwater explosion was followed by the unmistakable sounds of a submarine breaking up. It wasn't until 10:45 that debris finally reached the surface, confirming that RO-104 and all 58 hands had been lost. The deadly efficiency of the hunter-killer group was becoming apparent. In just 4 days, they had sunk 3 Japanese submarines, but the hunt was far from over. The very next day, May 24th, brought another contact and another kill. RO-116 was relatively new on only her second war patrol, under the command of Lieutenant Commander Shibuya Kuno. At 1200 hours, George gained radar contact at the remarkable range of 17,000 yards, nearly 10 miles. RO-116 dove immediately, but her crash dive was slower than it should have been, a sign of her crew's relative inexperience. England moved in and made 2 aborted Hedgehog runs, but on the third attempt at 0214, at least 3 projectiles struck home. RO-116 simply broke apart and sank, taking all 56 hands with her into the depths. 2 days later, on May 26th, the hunter-killer group found RO-108, commanded by Lieutenant Owari Konichi. This submarine had already proven herself dangerous to American forces. On October 3, 1943, RO-108 had fired a spread of 4 torpedoes at 3 American destroyers. USS Henley was struck by 2 torpedoes that broke the destroyer's keel. Henley broke in 2 and sank rapidly, killing 15 men and wounding 52 others. At 23:03 hours on May 26th, Raby gained radar contact on RO-108 at 15,000 yards, approximately 110 nautical miles, northeast of Seidler Harbor at Manus Island. England gained sonar contact at 1,650 yards. Raby was vectored in for the first attack, but her Hedgehog salvo missed. At 23:23, England commenced her attack run. This time, there would be no prolonged hunt. England's Hedgehog scored between 4 and 6 hits on the first salvo. The multiple explosions would have torn RO-108 apart instantly. RO-108 went down with all 53 hands. By now, Japanese naval intelligence was becoming alarmed. On May 27, 1944, the Japanese 6th Fleet intercepted and decoded American naval communications, indicating several submarines had been sunk. Warning messages were immediately transmitted to the remaining submarines of the NA line. RO-112 received the warning and immediately cleared the area. RO-109 also received the warning and escaped the killing zone, but RO-105, under the command of Lieutenant Junichi Ino, either never received the warning or, for reasons that will never be known, chose to remain at her assigned position. After sinking RO-108, the 3 destroyer escorts proceeded to Seidler Harbor at Manus to replenish their heavily depleted stocks of Hedgehog projectiles. Upon departing, they joined a larger hunter-killer task group centered on the escort carrier USS Hoggett Bay, and including the destroyers USS Hazelwood, USS Heermann, USS Hole, and USS McCord, plus the destroyer escort USS Spangler. During the night of May 30th to 31st, Hazelwood gained radar contact on what would prove to be RO-105. The submarine immediately dove and commenced evasive maneuvers that would continue for the next several hours in one of the most prolonged submarine hunts of the war. The hunt continued through the night, with multiple ships taking turns attacking. As dawn broke on May 31st, Spangler and England joined the attack. At this point, Commander Haynes, still aboard George, transmitted a message that would become part of naval legend. "Oh, hell, go ahead, England." It was both an acknowledgement of England's superior success rate and an expression of frustration at the submarine's stubborn refusal to die. England's attack was devastating. At 0736, the Hedgehog salvo triggered a massive underwater explosion that dwarfed even the spectacular destruction of I-16. Between 6 and 10 projectiles found their mark, and the resulting detonations were followed by secondary explosions as RO-105's own torpedoes detonated. The violence of the explosion was extraordinary. A column of water shot hundreds of feet into the air, and the shock wave could be felt through the hulls of ships miles away. RO-105 was literally blown apart with all 55 hands killed instantly. In just 12 days from May 19th to May 31st, 1944, USS England had sunk 6 Japanese submarines, a feat unparalleled in the history of anti-submarine warfare. The achievement was all the more remarkable considering that England was not a powerful destroyer, but a modest destroyer escort, and that she was just 5 months out of the shipyard on her first war patrol. Of the 7 submarines assigned to the NA line, 6 had been destroyed, with 5 of them falling to England's Hedgehog. Upon learning of the achievement, Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Ernest J. King, sent a message that carried the weight of a promise: there'll always be an England in the United States Navy. The crew of England was awarded the Presidential Unit Citation, one of only 3 destroyer escort crews in World War II to receive this honor. Lieutenant Commander Pendleton received the Navy Cross for his leadership during the submarine killing spree. The strategic implications were even more significant. The loss of the NA line submarines initially convinced Japanese naval commanders that a large American force had passed through the area en route to the Western Carolines or Western New Guinea, rather than the actual target, the Mariana Islands. This misinterpretation caused Admiral Toyota to delay and misdirect the execution of Operation Ago. The American invasion of Saipan began on June 15, 1944, catching the Japanese fleet out of position. The resulting Battle of the Philippine Sea, fought on June 19 to 20, 1944, saw the destruction of Japanese naval aviation as an effective force. In what American pilots called the Marianas Turkey Shoot, over 400 Japanese aircraft were shot down against minimal American losses. The story of USS England ultimately transcends its specific historical moment to become something universal, a testament to human ingenuity, courage, and determination in the face of mortal danger. The crew of USS England did exactly that in May 1944, and their achievement will be remembered as long as naval history is studied and tales of courage at sea are told.